is a fascinating scene that we have in the gospel lesson. Jesus is there with his disciples and asks them, well, what are they saying about me? What's on the nightly news and CNN and all of those places? I'd like to know. What are you hearing? Well, they're kind of looking at each other and scratching their beards a little bit. And, well, some say John the Baptist resurrected, or Elijah come back again, or a prophet, or a teacher, or healer. All those names are coming up amongst the people. And then Jesus asks them the real question. Who do you say that I am? And right away, you have to love Peter. I love Peter because sometimes his mouth gets going faster than his brain does, but he does real well this time. Well, you are the Messiah, the Christ. Of course, then there's a little bit of a passage after that where Jesus says that you will be the rock, Petros, of the church. You really wonder what was going through Peter's mind when Jesus asked that. Because they had been together. Peter had been following Jesus for months and months. There was this relationship, companionship, friendship, leadership, all of this. That was all there. But Peter comes up with, you are the Christ, the Messiah. And you wonder exactly, did he really realize what that entailed, what that really meant? Because in another place, Jesus talks about that being the Messiah, he must die. And of course, Peter got all upset very quickly. You can't have that happen to you. Well, there he was switching back into that companion, leader, friendship mode. So we have this great story. So I guess then we have to move from that and ask you, who do you say this person is? Now, I know it's really too easy for you to say, well, pick up the Bible, Pastor, and it says right there that Jesus is the Christ. Well, that's too easy. Who is this Jesus to you? I can ask you a couple questions, and I'll pretty much know what you'll answer me, or what you think of this Jesus. The first one is, what do people say about you? Are you one of those nice, positive, warm, fuzzy people that just outgoing and embracing everybody, bringing this nice, warm feeling to the world? When we had our supermarket, there was a gentleman that came into the supermarket. His name was Ralph. And one of our employees always had a story for Ralph. And she would tell him this story, and he would start laughing. Not just a little giggle, but this deep laugh that embellished the whole store. I mean, you were in the whole store, you could hear it. And everybody else would start to smile and giggle too, because they knew Ralph. He brought that kind of a presence to the place. Are you supportive of your friends? Are you there when they need you? Are you forgiving? Something happens, Just let it go, form a new union relationship, and go on with it? Are you one of these uplifting kind of people? And I was in Yucaipa. Y'all heard of Yucaipa across the hill there. At a youth group, we were going to Seattle. Probably about 20 teenagers, which is lots of fun. Anyway, one of them was a cross-country runner, and I would go out in the morning and run. And we happened to be in San Francisco. And I thought, this is going to be cool, because the streets are like that. Then there's a little flat spot where the street comes across, and then it goes back up again. And I thought that'd really be kind of neat. Well, she wanted to go along, so away we went. We did about 4 of these. We would run the hill and then walk the flat part to rest up, and then by about the 4th or 5th one, I started walking up the hill, and she looked at me and said, well, Pastor, you can run any time you want now. And she basically kind of egged me on up the hill. That kind of supporting pushing. So do people think of you in that kind of sense? Or do they think of you in another kind of not so nice sense? I always kind of compare that kind of an attitude to the refrigerator. You know, you open up the freezer and you get this cold air. You get people like that. When you're around them, you can just kind of feel the coldness, the aloofness. There's no forgiveness. There's no compassion. There's not much of anything there. And sometimes they have that look on their face like, you know, when you were growing up and would make faces and your mom said, you better not do that, otherwise your face is going to stay that way. Right? Well, for some people, it did. Their face stuck at 5 and 7 o'clock. You know. Those kind of people. So, I guess the question really that we ask is, well, what do people say about you when you aren't around? Now, I know that's not the nicest thing in the world, but folks, it happens. What do people say about you when you aren't around? That might be the truest test. Well, let's flip this thing over again. What do you say about others? What do you say about those people? I want you to think of someone that you really like, that's one of these warm, positive, supportive, forgiving, what other word can I throw in there? Make it really passionate, compassionate, there you go. All of that. You think of somebody like that? I'm sure you don't have to think long, because you know these kinds of people that are there for you. Now, I want you to think of someone that you don't really like. And I'm trying not to look at anyone in the congregation right now. Someone maybe that did something that you didn't like, maybe to you or to someone you know, someone that's really you haven't had this good relationship with, you know, that person. And you thinking of someone now. And what you think of them. I contend that that's what you think of Jesus. But Pastor, How can you compare Jesus to that person? Well, Jesus has a few sayings about this. He says, whenever you give a drink to the least of these, my sisters and brothers, whenever you help them, whenever you do something for them, you are doing it as if for me. It is in those people that Jesus is present. Look at who Jesus befriended. Tax collectors. I'm letting that word float around a little bit. Anybody really love tax collectors? I know they have to be there, and I've had some interesting relationships with tax collectors. I'm sure in Jesus' time it was worse because they could put a little surcharge on top of everything for their own benefit. They were hated. Jesus befriended them. The prostitutes on the street, scorned by everyone. The poor looked down upon. These are the people that Jesus befriended, brought them into his life, made them part of his life, shared his life with them. It is in these people that we see Jesus, because that's where he was and where he is. Puts a little bit different light on that person that you really don't like. This child of God, loved by God. So, I guess we can expand a little bit and say, what role does Jesus have in your life? And of course, we can do this friend, companion kind of thing. We even have songs about that. I think it's, what's the name of that song? What a friend we have, in something like that. I've heard that a couple times. And that's wonderful. That's how Jesus wants us to look to him. His friend, companion, supportive, that person that's always there for us. But there's far more to this person than just that. For he is the Christ. He is the one that came to this earth to bring all of us back into union with God. It is through his life and death and resurrection that we are united with Jesus to that, or brought into that union with God again. So, the final question, I'm full of questions this morning, is, I guess, what does Jesus think of you? That probably is the most important one. And Jesus would say without hesitation that you are a child of God, loved by God. You are precious to me. I came here to this earth for you. I died for you. I rose for you to be with you forever and ever. And it was in that act of Jesus coming and dying for us, when we were sinful, enemies of God, considered maybe by God as those people, that Jesus came to love us and die for us, befriend us, bring us into his life forever and ever. So, I can look at your life and have a pretty good idea of what you think of Jesus, who he is. But the real interesting thing is, for all of us, it is in people looking at you and me that they will see Jesus. It is looking at your life that people will see the resurrected Christ. There's somebody that's really familiar. He's not here right now. I think he's in South Dakota right now. Jerry always says, you might be the only Bible that one person will ever read. That puts a real duty, weight on every one of us. But we are given the Holy Spirit to do that. We are given the life of Christ to do that, to radiate that life of Christ with all the love and life. Did you ever know someone that would never ever meet a stranger? Whenever they met someone, they always met a friend, and they would strike up a conversation and befriend them immediately and remember them for years later. Jesus wants us to be that kind of a person, to befriend those, even those that we don't like, because it is in our life that they will see Jesus. Amen. Amen.